Hey there, guys. I'm here back again. Thanks for those of you who've been following. I've been doing some video podcasting for a couple months now, and I'm really excited today because we're talking about something that's been on my heart and something that I've been talking about for years, actually, with friends and colleagues and mentors. And I just finally decided to kind of pull the trigger on an idea that I had for years. And I'm starting a kind of a series with some people on my video podcasting, talking specifically about Asian culture, and practical Christian living, basically Christian practices, how we live out our Christian life. And the premise, the kind of main idea, the question is, how does our Asian culture interfere, and influence the way we live out our Christian life? I've been talking about this with so many of my friends, again, with mentors for years. I had so many ideas to do, and then COVID hit, and then things went crazy. And I actually decided, hey, I'm going to try to do this. And if you're interested in this, please make a comment down below, ask questions, because part of this for me is also research. I want to learn not only from my friends and colleagues, but I want to learn from you as well. If for those of you who are Asian Christians going to church, I'm sure there's going to be a couple points here that might resonate with you, and I would love to dialogue with you and hear out your questions. So I'm going to bring in my friend here. All right, this is my friend. I had him on the podcast a couple months ago. This is Pastor Wilson Wang. He is a church planting pastor out here in Placentia, right? Or is it Fullerton?
Fullerton, yep.
Fullerton, okay. And I had the privilege of actually going out to his launch service. I remember that. It's like 300 people there. You had food. And I still remember your sermon. You preached on the prodigal son.
I never saw 300 again. But it was a good.
Hey, you're not supposed to say that, man. Okay, you're not supposed to say that. Oh, come on, man! I'm trying to build up your church here. Wilson has been in pastoral ministry for a long time, and he has been part of Asian Church also for a long time. You know, Wilson and I, we talked a little bit about this, and I'm very thankful for Wilson to join me and just to see where this goes. And I asked him, hey, do you have maybe some good thoughts to share? And he has some great thoughts. And we're just going to have a dialogue here. Let's kind of get into this right away. And let me just start it off with something a little bit more easy for you. Did you grow up in the Asian church?
Yeah, that is an easy question. I did.
So, like, growing up in the Asian church, what were, some of those, like, common difficulties or frustrations that you had?
I mean, I was blessed in a lot of ways. My parents found Jesus at the church I grew up in, and it really was kind of this community center for Chinese people who wanted to not only worship the Lord but really have family. My parents left their parents, their siblings in Taiwan, and were really on their own. And so church became family in a way that I don't think I'll ever get, or people who grew up with family around them will understand. We ate meals together. We had service at 9, Sunday school, and then we hung out till 5 on the campus. And I think a lot of you who grow up in that type of church experience that. So, I mean, to start off, kind of the biggest blessing, their salvation and understanding church as family in a way that I think a lot of people are longing for in this generation. But some of the hard stuff was definitely like the cultural dynamic. And, I'm very American. I was born here. I have a very Western mentality, especially when it comes to leadership. And, my pastor, I think he had a really hard time developing leaders. He definitely trusted his thoughts. He was the guru. Very Confucian, thinking where just it's top down, right? He sets up these levels of society: teacher, student, parent, child, governor, citizen, and that's how we ran. One person had the information, everyone else just followed. So when I pushed back or had conflicting ideas, um, there wasn't space for that. It was just,
When did you start noticing this? Was it like high school? You started to push back, or was it junior high?
yeah, I think, in a Chinese context, not only were they more susceptible to that leadership or preferred it, everything he did was contextualized well. But when he was trying to lead the English ministry with a very Asian lens and perspective, um, nothing fit well. And we just went through many iterations of classes and cohorts of people aging into college or young adult and leaving, the silent exodus. And I almost can put years on, tiers of people just exiting. I remember going into church and we had 120 people from young adults all the way to high schoolers and junior hires. And we walked in one day, me and my friends, we walked in from 120, it went down to 25. It was empty.
Whoa,
No
that's nuts,
pastor,
man.
no worship. My friend walked up and started leading worship. It was like we were completely abandoned.
That's wild,
Um,
man.
from then on, as like an eighth, ninth grader, we just started taking on the reins, rebuilding the thing. We saw another exodus 5 years later, and then we ended up being the class that left when I was about 25, 26.
Isn't it
So it's just
crazy?
really sad.
Isn't it
Yeah.
crazy how, because the story you're describing, I think a lot of people have experienced in Asian church, but isn't it crazy how like we have this idea of the Exodus, that 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 term silent exodus of Asians going out of Asian church, got really popular, I think like 10 or 20 years ago. But then there's this other group like you that just stood loyal, and that
And then
also says something about our culture. Like no matter how bad it got, you had like what 100, like I don't know, 90% loss. You just stayed loyal, man.
I also didn't have a car, and I was like ninth grade. My parents were
Well,
going
what about
there.
your parents? Like when your parents were seeing that, what did they think? Were they just like, "Hey, this is suffering, that typical Asian suffering, you got to get through it," or was it more like they didn't really think it was a big deal?
It was their family. So I think for my parents, they had no reason to leave.
Yeah.
My mom was on staff, and my friends were still there.
Right.
So I just don't think we had the options. But again, when this happened in our 20s, the same friend group, 15 years later, started talking about the same thing. So I think that's the sad part. Yeah.
What
Did you experience that? Did you grow up in a Korean church and
Dude, I did. I grew up Korean church almost my whole life. I'm trying to think in my childhood because I grew up in California and I moved to Seattle. When I was in California, I used to go to this huge Korean church in Irvine called Bethel Korean Church. Have you heard of that church? Um,
not sure.
it was a
What
huge
was it
church.
again?
It's called Bethel Korean Church.
Oh, Bethel. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know Justin? He's in charge of the English ministry over
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah.
So I'm like old school Bethel. There's only like I always talk about this because there's only a few old school guys still there. We talk about like hey, we were like the
Oh,
original Bethel.
jeez.
Yeah, like I was there in the '80s, and
Dude.
it's crazy because Bethel was a huge church back then, and then it's a huge church now. That's where we were. My parents left that church, and then we went to a different church because of certain reasons that I'm still actually unsure of because I was in elementary. But I knew that while we were gone, after we left,
Mm.
my friends started telling me about like all these people leaving that church, starting new churches, things like that. So I remember we kind of missed it. We kind of missed it. When I went to Seattle, it didn't happen. But again, I mean, growing up, you're hearing about it all the time, all the time.
Right.
And the reason why I asked that question is because when I was in junior high in Seattle, going to this one Korean church, yeah, we went through like such hard times in our youth group.
Mm.
And it was just loyalty, or like that's just the way it was, that's just the way it
Right.
was, and you just stay there. And I think there's something about you said it something a really good point, which is I think no matter who you are, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, there's this idea of community. Like that's like all they have, you know?
That's their
Especially
family.
especially like in the 70s and 80s, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's not like now. It's like they can't just go out and meet other Asians.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's like all their close friends. So leaving would be so hard. But you hear these stories about exoduses, church splits, you know, church
Oh
splits
man.
all the time, things like that. So then you said that you finally left. What age were you? Were you in high school still? Were you in college by that time?
Yeah, I was in seminary, finishing up seminary, and I had felt the call to plant a church very early. And also me and my pastor, he really loved me. I remember he we were going on a mission trip to Ghana in college, and he was sitting next to me. He said, "Wilson, stay at a church a long time, because a lot of pastors enjoy short-term fruit, but they never get long-term fruit." And he said, "I got to hold you in my arms, and now I get to go to a mission trip with you as a co-laborer." He just was so affectionate toward me. He paid for my seminary. I was like the only person in the
Wow,
history of the church where he just straight up paid for my seminary.
that's
But
awesome.
yeah, but as I became like more of an independent thinker and a leader in different ways, we just started butting heads. And then he sent me to Singapore for a year as like a last ditch attempt to not fire me because he loved me. But I called it obedience school because Singapore is like one of the most conformist countries you can go to. So he sent me a church where like they're basically teaching you how to conform. So,
Whoa, that's scary,
sit,
dude.
stand, roll over. So I'm trying to learn how to like pee in the right corner of the house, and got back, told him I still wanted to plant a church, and basically he fired me through a
Wow.
network of other people, which is how you get fired at Asian churches. Yeah, but that was sad. At the same time, like I get it. A lot of if a church doesn't have a vision to plant and you're not working in sync with it, it's a threat. It
Right.
just feels like a threat.
They're
Like in
afraid to
my
lose people. They're afraid to lose people. That's what it is, man. They don't want people
people,
to leave.
right? But a lot of people were gonna leave already. I think a big part of why I wanted to plant a church was because my friends were like, "Hey, we're gonna go in the next year. We're leaving because just they just did things that didn't make sense. Like we had a big church announcement in Chinese that they would play in our English service, right? I was gonna ask you, John, like one of my theories is that it's like easier to be a KM than a CM, a Chinese or a EM in a Korean church is easier than a EM in a Chinese church because what I found, I'm married to a Korean Australian, and I think Koreans really enjoy their mother culture because of pop culture, the dramas, the music. So I feel like there's a deeper cultural tie there, even if you're born and raised in the U.S. You appreciate their Koreanness. I think Chinese are like master assimilators. Like I feel like we're in more countries than any other ethnicity, right? You'll find us in Brazil, you'll find us in Russia, you'll find us in like the Middle East. Like we'll start up a Chinese fast food place anywhere, and our philosophy is like become part of the people. My dad, when America was doing Olympics in China, I was like, "Who are you rooting for?" He's like, "America, man. I'm American." He said this with like a Chinese accent, right? I don't think Koreans have that kind of assimilation mindset. And so, do you think it's easier for EM second gen to feel like there's less of a disconnect when it comes to that top-down leadership from the Korean side? Or do you feel like it's very similar in terms of like, man, when you make decisions, I don't understand it, it doesn't resonate, it's not relevant. What do you think?
I think there are many more similarities than differences. Uh, I only know of one friend, a personal friend, who actually served in an EM with Korean church, and then actually served as an EM pastor in a Chinese church. He got both
Oh,
cultural context. And I remember he said this, and then just again, this is just one guy, so I'm not saying this is, the truth for everyone. But I remember he said this. He said that the Chinese culture, they will stab you in the front, but the Korean culture, they'll stab you in the back.
mm.
And so he said that to
What's your
me.
preference?
What do you mean between those two? Oh yeah, stab in the front for sure,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Like you want to see it coming.
good point.
Absolutely. So I remember he said that, and we were talking a little bit about it. I think to answer your question, I think the reason why I your explanation is the way it is because I mean Chinese culture. You guys are way further in generations than we are, right? I mean Korean culture is just kind of in that third gen, but very very early stages of third gen.
Yeah.
Um, but Chinese culture, you guys are like probably like fifth, sixth gen by now or something like that.
I think that's more Japanese. Like
Okay.
there are Chinese that go that far, but I
Yeah.
rarely meet. I
Okay.
actually meet people like second and third gen as well.
Like this is how weird it is, and I think this is the good piece of that describes what I just said, which is today when I see Koreans, even kids, they all know a little bit of Korean here and there, things like that. Even like my friends, they all speak Korean, things like that.
Yeah.
It's still weird for me when I see Chinese parents way older than me, like in their 60s, and they're like, dude, I don't know any Chinese. And I'm like, that's so weird for me because
Mm,
for me, I'm a second gener and we're still like again, like breaking into that third gen. But for that person, they're like, yeah, like fourth, fifth gen. They're like, yeah, I don't know Chinese. My parents don't know Chinese. And I was like, dude, that's so weird. That's
yeah.
so weird. Because my parents immigrated here from Korea. So I think again, going back to what you just said, is because I think you guys are a little bit more further down the line than we are, which really changes up the environment. Again, that Americanness, maybe that's why, because that's why we are so attached to our Korean culture, or I don't know if attached is the right word, but we have much more affinity to our culture than to American culture. Maybe it's BTS. I don't know.
Definitely BTS.
Yeah, yeah. When you were in now your church plant, you kind of broken off from the more of the traditional Chinese cultural bubble, right? Did you experience? Because now you're in a more of an Americanized church, right? But do you still experience that cultural influence or just obstacle? Like you want to go do something with the church, but maybe some people or your congregation even is like not really as excited as you are about it. Do you ever think like, gosh, man, it's that Chinese culture? It's still kind of
Still in
influencing you
there.
guys. Yeah.
Great question. I mean, I see it as when I left my church, I went to Ambassador for a little bit with Ray Chang. And then we planted after 4.5 years. And then Planting Renew really helped me pick and choose like, what part of the Asian culture do I want to continue to integrate into my church plant. Um, it's primarily Asian, but we have a lot of people who aren't Asian in leadership roles and in our community. But I know like I'm gonna bring my Asianness into this community. And there were things that, man, I did not want there. So I think I like staff meetings. I remember wanting to get injured on Monday on my sabbatical mountain biking. I was like, I really hope I get injured so I don't have to go to staff meeting. But that's pretty dark, right? Like I'd rather break an arm than go to staff meeting because it's like 3.5 hours of all in Chinese. We had like a devotional check-in where my pastor would like flip through our devotional that we're supposed to do. And if he saw blank pages, he's like, why didn't you do it this day? And then he would have us read our devotional reflections to each other, sing in Chinese with hand motions.
Very
And
academic
he
there. Very academic.
very humbling. Yeah. And then the worst part was we had probably had like 35 staff, and he would go around and ask every staff member to share what they did last week, and he would comment on it. And then we would go around and share what you're going to do this week, and he would comment. So it was like a 30 person one-on-one meeting with our lead pastor that I had to sit in. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to die.
Yeah. Those are the worst,
So
man. Oh.
yeah, so like our staff meetings don't look like that. And then I think a lot of the top-down leadership, where the lead pastor just has all the power, he could put funding wherever he wanted to. There was no checks and balances. But I
Right.
mean, our
Right.
churches usually reflect the government that we're in, right? So for them, that's the Chinese government. It's very dictatorship and top
Ah.
down. In our, I grew up American. We value checks and balances. We don't trust an individual with, you know, executive power. So we've just and I've just been really blessed to have great elders where I told them from day one, if you guys disagree with me, I will submit to you. Like, why else are we having meetings, So we rarely vote because we always usually come up with something that we really kind of feel is better than where we started, our starting positions. And then sometimes we've actually voted more as a membership than we have as a leadership. So the times where we felt like we're making a bigger decision, we'd vote as a membership. And I remember one time I really wanted to start like a coffee shop in the city and have it kind of be
That's dope.
um, a usage space,
Sweet.
worship practice there, small groups, have the coffee shop employ special needs people.
Awesome.
But it caused a lot of division with the church, and we did a vote. I wanted a two-third majority, and we were trying to raise another like $2,000 a month. So when we were counting the votes, we were literally one vote short of doing the coffee shop and $50 out of 2,000. I was like,
Wow.
can my vote count as two? Come on, guys.
Right.
Like
Right.
I was like so frustrated. But we went back to the congregation. We told them the results. I was disappointed, but I didn't guilt anyone. I didn't lash out at the people. I knew everyone who voted cared, right? So, anyways, over the next few months, I had about four people come up to me, kind of asking how I was feeling about the situation, caring for me, and then telling me that they actually voted against the coffee shop, and they said they were so thankful that they could experience a lead pastor submitting to the congregation, you know, and most of them were Asian, and they've just never seen that. They've never seen the congregation be encouraged to have a voice and for us to practice mutual submission,
Humility.
regardless of,
Humility.
yeah. And I think that set the tone for all the other times we voted. I just go back to that. Hey, I submitted when the vote didn't go my way. I submitted to the Spirit's move in that process, and that's my expectation of all of you when you didn't get what you wanted, and you would submit to the community. And I think that's built out a really amazing culture where people aren't just up and leaving when they don't get what they want. So, yeah, so I think I felt like I really got to offset a lot of the things I didn't like about the Asian culture. Um, and church planting gives you that luxury where you start from scratch. It's you and a PDF, walking around trying to get other people to buy in. You get to start on your mission with your chair and your campfire. You don't have to move toward it. And then you try to build, a house out of that plot of land. So, yeah. So to answer your question, I think, other people might say like these parts of Asian culture is that we knew and I don't like them. But I think I don't feel that way because I got to pick and choose most of it. So,
I mean, in Chinese culture, I mean, you could say Chinese culture or Asian culture, it doesn't matter. But um, are there like specific things you think about in Chinese culture or Asian culture that you feel are obstacles between trying to pursue practical things that we're supposed to be doing as a Christian? The Bible teaches us to do certain things, I think the example that you just gave, like, yeah, it's kind of rare sometimes to see this crazy humble form of submission. It's more like we submit because that's what our culture tells us to do, but we like do it begrudgingly. Like
yeah.
but to see this humble form, it's like, whoa, that was awesome. So do you think there are certain obstacles that come in the way of whether it's Chinese Christians or just Asian Christians in general to really follow through with some Christian practices? And if there are, like, what are some of those examples?
Yeah, I think it took me a long time to understand grace. I feel like, we take our academic performance. My mom, She has two masters and she got a nursing degree, and her average test score was a 97. I failed fifth grade. So, so she was like, that's your dad's fault. But her whole spirituality was wrapped around that type of achievement mentality.
Right.
Um, and she passed that down to me for sure, and took a lot of years to work that out. And I noticed, maybe it's an Asian thing where, or maybe it's universal, where that first gen of Christians, man, they're just hardcore evangelists. They're on fire, they kind of get it and it's fresh. But I think the grace part takes another generation to seep in.
Can I ask specifically about that? That's when you said that, I can't get my mind off of that. Why did it take a long time for you to understand grace? I'm very interested in this. Why did you say that?
Yeah, I think our church was really results driven. We wanted to grow bigger. We wanted more baptisms. We counted everything, which isn't bad, but I think that's what measured whether we were doing a good job or not. Um, and so I just got caught up in that culture and context. Yeah, where it's high performance.
Because when you said that, I was like, gosh, yeah, I think I struggle with that too. Like, just the ability just to show grace for people. And I mean, that's across all culture. Always show grace is very difficult. It takes a lot of humility. But I think when we talk about Asian culture, do you think it's hard for us to show grace because our culture is so hierarchical, is that when we get wronged, instead of like showing grace, we just expect like, no, man, you're supposed to do this, okay? Because I said so. Because that's kind of the way our culture is. Do you think that's where it
Mm.
comes from?
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if it's like we don't know how to give grace to ourselves, So then we
Yeah,
don't know
so
how to
much
give grace to
pressure.
others.
Yeah, so much
Yeah,
pressure on
like
us.
we're holding us to a high standard. So it's an internal voice. Like the way I talk to myself when I fail and I'm meeting my own standards is exactly how I'm going to talk to someone else. So if
Yes.
I am
Oh, it's so
speaking
good.
graciously to me, I'm going
So
to
good.
speak graciously to you and my staff.
That that's
So,
that's golden right there. I think you're right, dude. Like we have grown up with such high pressure
mm,
academically, for sure results driven. For
yeah.
sure, Asian culture is all about, dude, that guy has a big church. Oh, he's awesome.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
All of us want to be like John Piper and preach at Together for the Gospel, and we think that is the pinnacle of like ministry. Um, yeah, and like we expect that upon others because that's what we expect for ourselves, dude. That
Yeah.
that is gold right there. I really like how you just said that. That's great. I think that there was. I remember talking to someone like 2 years ago, and I just this guy's like a CEO of his business. I just asked him like, how am I supposed to respond like when someone uh, does something to me and I just get so frustrated and upset, like they are treating me a certain way or something like that, and
Mm.
it's like, dude, that's not the way you treat people or talk to people, things like that. How am I supposed to respond? And I remember he said something that kind of is similar to what we're saying. He said like, you know, think about in the past when someone did that to you, right? When you were
Mm.
younger, like when you were like 20 or even like 15, think about how you felt when someone did that to you.
Mm.
And he's like, take that feeling and use it so that you don't respond that same way back to others. He's
Yeah.
like, don't let other people feel the way you felt when you were like 15 or 20 years old, things like that.
Mm.
And I think it's very similar to what we're talking about. I mean, this is the way we kind of view ourselves, or it's how we were treated.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for us to reciprocate that back to others because,
Very hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe there weren't good examples, things like that.
4.5 years of therapy was helpful. ISF was helpful. Having kids are helpful. My son, we were playing a ball game, and the balloon where you keep the balloon
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
air and
Uh-huh.
touch the ground, and he's like, "Well, when we lose, we try again." And I had said that exact same thing to him like 2 weeks ago, and it was humbling to know that that became his internal voice. And I'm just like, God, I need to check how I speak to my kid because he's going to speak to himself like that for the rest of his life. And so man, for my mom, it was all about whether I could do academics well or not, and I
Right.
couldn't.
Me
Um,
too, man.
you too? Yeah, we became pastors. There's other pastors who are like, I could have been a doctor, but I chose to be a pastor.
Well, actually, what I meant was like that academic pressure was high. I did well in school, but dude,
Uh,
the pressure, oh my gosh, it was crazy, man, crazy.
yeah, and I think again, that's the whole framework of our spirituality, I think, too. So
I
yeah. Mm.
some of
What
those,
are what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, yeah, some of those things that you're saying is so true when it comes to obstacles. Do you think that because you say you're so Americanized, right? Do you think that because you're so Americanized that sometimes there's a disconnect between you and some of the members of your church because as an Americanized person, certain things make sense, right? But to someone
Uh-huh.
who's maybe not as Americanized, it doesn't really make sense. Do you feel like sometimes there might be a disconnect, or maybe there's a miss? Sometimes, like you sometimes miss out on certain things or certain ways that your members understand things.
Mm. I think at my first church, for sure, I would say I'm like a classic second generation Chinese American, so I don't know if
What does
I
that
didn't
mean?
grow up
Tell
in
me what
a
that means. What does a classic second gen Chinese American mean? Tell me what that means.
we love rice more than bread, we there's a performance aspect, high, you go to college or you get disowned. Family is like a super high value. I think family loyalty. So when I think about renewed, there are Asian aspects to it for sure. Like I think the way a lot of like my Asian friends or members would come to our church and loiter for an hour, then they go have lunch, and then we come back and play basketball at the gym, and then someone open up their house and they go crash the
Oh,
house
I
at
miss those
10 p.m.
times. I miss that. I
So we
know. It's
so that's
awesome.
still a part of our
It's
culture.
awesome. It's
And
awesome.
then the white members go home. The benediction, after the benediction, some of them want to eat lunch, but they're like, I don't want to wait an hour to eat lunch.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
why are we eating lunch an hour from now? Like, how does that make sense? So, because we're majority Asian American, they've kind of gotten sucked into our culture. But I do think there is a value for that, um, as millennials. Like, we do want community and family, but I just think the way I experienced that from a Chinese home church is always that's not replaceable.
Right.
My EM experience and the things I loved about it, all of my parents' friends were at church and they had no family around. It was the only family and friendships they had. So I mean, is that unhealthy? Maybe, but
Well,
but
that
it made for
again,
a meaningful community.
it's unhealthy only in the sense of like you purposely didn't, try to make connections. But again, like our parents, they came here and they had
Yeah.
nobody. That's why the Asian church was kind of the way it was. Like it was this
Hmm.
crazy unified like mafia, and that's why fellowship was so strong because their friends were all at church. They didn't have friends outside the
Yeah.
church. When you're describing that, dude, yeah, I miss that fellowship, which the Asian church does very well, very well.
Mm.
It might be one of their strongest points. Yeah, just like that all day Sunday, just like keeping that community and fellowship alive. Man, I miss that so much. And it's so funny when you made that comment about white vote because yeah, my church, it's like, dude, bro, when you said yeah, they after the benediction and then they leave, bro, man, for us it's like closing prayer of the sermon. They're like standing up and they're walking out, dude. Right?
Eat everyone out the parking
Yeah,
lot.
I gotta get out of the party. Let me get my kids. I got I gotta get out. Uh, yeah, man, and it's something that I miss a lot for sure. I remember when I first kind of this is when I was church planting too. After Friday night, we had some sort of college Bible study. It was so weird. I was like, "Hey guys, let's like go out to eat." let's go hang out. And
Yeah.
dude,
So,
all of them were like, yeah, we kind of just want to go home. It was so weird. I had to like beg them for months.
yeah.
Like,
They
come
got
on,
other friends.
let's
They got other things to do.
chill. Yeah, you know
Yeah.
what? It's
This was
not
your church friend.
right. That's what it really is. I think it's like, yeah, I have church friends, and then I got school friends, but I also think, yeah, it's like I got other things to do. Like literally, they think church is over. I got to move on to the
Yeah.
next thing. For
Right.
us, it's like, no, man, we want to keep this going. It's like
Yeah.
church is life.
Yeah. And I think that's really influenced how I pastor and lead, where so much of our application is communal. When I think about how do we evangelize, it's a communal application. We are doing like 9 a.m. Bible studies Monday through Friday. Um, and we're inviting the community to seek the Lord together on a daily basis, so when I think about how you live out the Christian life, of course there's individual application, but we almost lean on the communal application, which again, if I'm fully Western, you rarely hear that, right? You rarely hear like um, spiritual disciplines done from a communal perspective as even the main thrust.
All right. If it looks a little bit different, like the lighting, it's because we had to actually literally start a new session because Wilson's laptop ran out of battery.
Yeah, that's secret, man.
Oh, by the way, guess who I was just talking to? I was just Facebook chatting with your homie Greg Ma.
Oh, dude, we hang out a lot.
I know, dude. I was talking on the phone with him a couple weeks ago, and I dropped your name when he was asking me like who else is kind of doing this with us, and I said Wilson. I was like, do you know Wilson? He's like, yeah, we like before COVID we used to meet up once a month together. I was like, dude, no way. I didn't know,
Yeah.
man. Have you guys known each other for a long time?
We kind of have a little pastor group. So it's me, him, Rocky, Evergreen SGV, Eric from Cerritos Baptist. He took over.
Oh, Eric Nakimoto,
Nakimoto, yeah.
dude.
Kyle Shimagazzi from Seeds of Life. I don't even know Kyle. He's a great guy too.
Dude, man, I've known Eric, yeah, way back in the day. I mean, I'm not gonna try to say we're homies, but yeah, I totally know Eric. I haven't seen him for a long time, actually.
Oh, he's awesome. He's like definitely the nicest of the pastors, and I would work for him. I always tell the guys, if I get fired, I'll work for you, Eric. I'm not gonna work for Kyle because he loves office hours. Maybe Rocky.
What's crazy is I don't know if you ever, like back in the day when we were all in seminary, I don't know if you ever played ball with that guy, but dude, that guy was like one of the best ball players I've ever seen. Like never missed a shot. And then
Wow.
I remember I randomly ran into him in Cerritos. This was like years later, and I asked him, I was like, dude, man, are you still playing ball? You're the best, right? And then like 20 feet away from us were some of like his youth kids, and they all started laughing. And then and he's like, do you know why they're laughing? I was like, no, is it because they don't believe me? He's like, dude, man, I'm like so bad now. He's like, none of them knew me. And I was like, dude, you lost your skills. You were like one of the best, man. I was so disappointed.
Well, I told you about my knees, right? Anyways, I have terrible knees, and then we were talking about it in the pastor group, and Eric has had 7 knee surgeries on one knee.
Oh, shoot.
He arthritis as well. They were trying to inject cartilage in, but it comes in liquid, and you have to wait for it to harden, which takes like 6 months of you not putting weight on it. So for 6 months, he's basically like on crutches. So we're talking about all these alternate ways to, because he was bone on bone when he was playing basketball. So he and I really bonded because I have to give up beach volleyball. And we were talking about that, and man, that sounded like a lot. So anyways, I mean, those are my guys. I wouldn't be the leader I am, the pastor I am without them. They've just been such a blessing to my life. Greg's awesome. All those guys. I really appreciate all of them.
Yeah, accountability is so important. And just, as we're talking about Asian culture, man, especially in our culture, man, accountability is so important since we live in this honor shame culture. It's hard for us to kind of confess, not just weaknesses, but like real sin in our life, and it's sad, man. Like, this past like 5 years, we've known greats, like some greats that have gone down and just, just bad things happen and they just had to resign, stuff like that. Oh, it's scary because it's like, dude, that could happen to any of us, And that's why accountability is like so necessary.
Yeah, one of the things I'm most proud of our church this year is we did a 3-week series on sexual addiction, and then we started a workshop with Roy Kim. I don't know if you know him.
I do know him. He was on the podcast, man.
Yeah, so he led us into an 8-week workshop. We had 20 men and 20 women there once a week, and we made accountability groups. So out of the sermon series, we birthed 10 small groups, 10 accountability groups.
Awesome.
And I think especially the women, I just don't think there were a lot of opportunities for them to talk about it, even be acknowledged. Like I made a very strong effort to acknowledge women when we talked about sexual addiction, and to have a platform to, start sharing and have accountability. And man, it was just such a blessing to see during COVID, when this addiction is so much stronger and has a greater grip on our lives, for me, journey with the church in my own journey, for freedom. And I'm just so proud of our church. And again, another facet where Asian church can be so, we can hide. We have so much more reason to hide. And even pastors, I feel like, would hide and they want to build a pedestal, and they have to be the guru, right? They have to be the most spiritual person in the room. And everyone saw them like that. That's how they present themselves. But I think for me, I don't see myself as the most spiritual person at Renew, the person with the best doctrine, the best leader. I just believe God's called me into that position, and that's why I'm there. And I get to be primarily a brother. Like my essence, the core of me is that I'm a brother in Christ, and my function is I'm an elder pastor. But that function doesn't supersede me being a part of the family as an equal heir, with all of my church members. And so, yeah, I really wanted to build a church where they could see my flaws, they could see me bleed. I have nothing to hide, and people can kind of just make an informed decision of whether they want a pastor who struggles with these things, or they go to our church where they don't. But there's so many people who were part of Renew because they heard me struggle in different areas of my life and just felt like, okay, like I'll walk with him in this, like he gets it. So
what you're describing is, it's very uncommon. We never grew up with that. We both grew up with the pastor being on the pedestal, and maybe in really bad situations it was like a total separation, or in other situations it was like separated in the sense of like, we honored the pastor so much that we didn't know what was going on in his personal life, And so what you're describing, I think, is awesome, just for you to have that humility. It's sad, man, because like, again, we talk about, not only when I say the greats, I'm not just talking about like the mega church pastors who are white. We're seeing like even those in our culture, maybe not committing like heinous acts of sin, like some of those big stories in the past couple of years, but there's a lot getting kind of revealed and exposed out there. And I think it's because no one really knew what was going on in that person's personal life, And I think, again, in our culture, it's not just that pedestal thing, but I think it's seriously like you and I, we never experienced that. So therefore, when you and I, we're like in almost 40 now, we're pastors, we don't know how to really do that. And so when you're doing your accountability group and then I got mine, and we have this time to openly confess, it's all brand new to us. We're like literally doing it for the first time in our lives. And so I think just that personal aspect of being, look, I understand there's a role of the pastor, and I understand there's authority of the pastor, and I believe in that, by the way. But there's also like, dude, but I'm I'm human just like you. And like in my small group, I tell them sometimes, like, remember guys, I'm just John, you know. And
Yeah.
you know, it's great. The people in my small group, they all know that. They're like, you're a pastor. So I love it, man. You know, we're just all real, and we keep it very, very real. But yeah, I think that's so important. I think that's, to be honest, you know, I talk to DJ Schwang sometimes about this. I think that might be one of the next, I don't know what you want to call it, hurdles, maybe the next challenge, maybe even the next, you know, spin it in a positive way, the next kind of maybe big insight and win in our culture, to slowly discover how we can be more vulnerable, more not just share stories like during a sermon, but like you said, the members at your church, they know you, like, personally. They know what's going on in your life. That might be like the next big win for our friends and colleagues in Asian pastoral ministry.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you know, the question becomes like, who is your church family, right? Who are you fellowshipping with, confessing to, asking for prayer from? And there's two philosophies, right? There's the pastor who they're supposed to do that outside of the church, right? The church is their sheep, and they're kind of constructing a family for them, but it's not for you. You do it with your pastor friends. I remember when we first started church, I recruited some really amazing leaders, and I had a little elder group already. And me and my wife, I think we had like a 4 or 5 day fight. Like, we were at each other's throats. And those were some rough times. I mean, I was working 3 jobs. She was going to school, working 2. We just had some really big moments of like not sure what to do, coming to impasse. Like, she wants to pick up the bags and move home and stuff. And I remember asking, like, who do I want to bring this to? I know I can't solve it. I know I need help. Is it going to be within the church or outside? Is it going to be the pastor of my old church or my elders here? And I was scared because they had just signed up like a month ago. I can't lose these guys. But I decided that that's the type of relationship I want with my church, is that my older brothers and sisters, my mentors, and my peers will also be here. So I have 2 guys that I renewed, that one had mentored me on the campus side, and one's a life mentor for me. He's not an elder. Right now he's very busy. He's not serving, but we meet up once a month, and I just pick his brain. And even on my staff, Dave Jung, he's my family pastor. And when we go to family group, I sit under him, you know, like, I want to learn from his life, and I want him to shepherd me and my wife. Our young adult pastor graduated from Fuller, 50-something, super wise. And I look to them as my older brothers and sisters in Christ. Like, when we're running staff meetings, I'm still delegating, I'm still vision casting, I'm still giving you direction, right? That's my function. But my essence is I need a family too. And it's like a really amazing place to have my older brothers and sisters within my church who know me, love this church. It's such a gift, yeah, that God gave us.
You know, before we started the new session here, we were talking about fellowship and how, you know, Asian churches do that so well, and yeah, I miss that a lot. There's that, what you were talking about, that communal aspect, just is so strong, and I love hearing about that, and then the examples you gave. When you're doing your church plant, and you know, even as you're observing churches or talking to your friends and stuff, what are like some specific things you have? I guess you kind of see that you learned that in your days of Asian church, and you've brought that over now to the church plant.
Yeah.
What are some of those strengths from like Asian church that you see that you brought over?
Yeah. Like, I think the community piece is so big, and it wasn't just me. There were so many people that kind of came in with that background that I really appreciated. I think for me, the progression is, let's not just be community for each other. Let's be community for our city, right? So I've really tried to leverage our family and community-ness to say, okay, how do we extend that? And so we have a group of people who play with kids who have survived domestic violence as their parents are doing a support group. We have a group of people who go to foster kids camp and feed foster youth once a month. We have dinner with them. We have a group of people tutoring kids after school and mentoring them. And for me, I see that as community in almost its purest form, where we go out together and we're making an impact. And the friendships and camaraderie, when you have a mission, right, is so much stronger than just like sitting at home, like watching Netflix, which is a lot of what community felt like in my EM, right? It was fun. We had close friendships, but we didn't do anything together. The word fellowship in the Bible is there's a military aspect to it where it's like comrades or brothers at arms coming together to take a space, to take a location. They have a purpose. And so another example is a lot of sermons I hear about evangelism. People are super motivated. They want to do it. But then they are alone, right? You send them off. Everyone like made a commitment to reach out to their friends, but they're doing it by themselves. For us, we'll do these initiatives where we share, where we give a tool, and then we break off into groups of 3, and we say, why don't we all right now invite 3 people to coffee as a group of 3? And because that whole initiation phase is the most scary, right? That whether you're going to be rejected or not. So they all do the invitation in community, and then they pray for those appointments. And then during the appointment, we have it on each other's calendars. We call each other, text in, hey, how's it going? We're praying for you. So I want to do as much in community as I can. And I think that's been such a great strength of the Asian American church. We're already communal, but being immigrants to a foreign country, I mean, it's just heightened. And then in that faith, I feel like we reflect acts really well there.
You know, when you say that whole communal thing, I was just thinking how, you know, again, for our culture, it's a little bit difficult to do like one-on-one personal evangelism. Across culture, it's really hard. You know, that's kind of scary for a lot of people. But I think in our culture, even more, because we're typically a little bit to ourselves. You know, we're not really the loudest voice. But then again, also because of how we grew up, most of us have grown up with like Asian friends our whole life, and that is our community. So it's a little bit scary to come out of that and go into the white community or the black community and try to evangelize, things like that. So when you talk about communal thing, I was thinking about that, like, man, that might be the key for more evangelism to be practiced in the Asian church, to do it together, like do it with a group of 2 or 3, because that's a lot easier than doing it by yourself sometimes.
Yeah. We had a huge rock climbing community at Renew. We probably had like 50 people with rock climbing passes in the same spot called the Factory. And I was like, how do we make this our mission field, right? You know, when my college students, I would say, hey, let's study in the same dormitory as a group, and then invite other people to like have snacks with us, study with us, join our table, and just give a inviting family culture. And then in the context of us being together, you know, how do we navigate? We get to navigate the conversation because we're the majority. And how do we invite them into Bible study or church or just into a spiritual conversation? So I just think, man, like, it's been amazing to see that play out at church and at campus life. Yeah.
You know, let's say there was an opportunity in the future. Let's just pretend you are preaching at an event about Asian culture and what we're talking about. What would be one topic or one message you would be passionate about focusing on? Something about Asian culture and just this whole thing that we're talking about and practical Christian living. What's one like slice of the pie, one topic, one kind of area that you would want to preach about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, we talked about community a lot. I think, you know, for me, I have a really big heart for narrative theology. So I would talk about looking at the Bible as a story and how we fit into that, finding our purpose through that, our occupations, how it comes out of reflecting Jesus and his big story. So we talked about that last time. So those would probably be the biggest things on my heart. Yeah.
Well, unpack that a little bit. I mean, are you saying like how we fit into the narrative?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, part of this big redemptive story, right? And so we're, as Asian Americans, we're so big on occupation, mostly doctors and lawyers, you know, like my dad woke me up every morning in elementary school saying, Wilson, there's a surgery in operation room 2. That's how I woke up for like 3rd grade class. And I felt 5th grade, and then that stopped happening. But we're so occupationally minded as Asian Americans. Our parents just worked that into us. But oftentimes it's just social status, money, you know, kind of helping people as like a side thing. Like, and I just think for my contribution is I wrote I'm writing a children's book series. So we have 3 large areas right now that we've completed. So one's on healing, one's on creativity, and one's on justice. And so the healing one, you know, we want people to walk away from this book saying, I'm called to be a doctor so that I can reflect Jesus, the great physician. I'm called to be a judge to reflect God, the great judge. I'm called to be a creative to reflect the creator. Like, God has occupational titles. So when we look at our occupation, we should look at how he's carried out his occupational title in its value and purpose. And then there's the big story of Eden, where we had perfect bodies, no one got sick. And then the fall, where we all experienced death and sickness. But then we have Old Testament, the Levites being set up to bring healing, Jesus healing as a part of foretelling his kingdom. And as he was known as the healer, right? Teacher and healer. And so when we heal, we're an extension of Jesus' ministry and this story. When we help someone see better, it's like an extension of Jesus healing the blind. When we help someone walk as a physical therapist, we're extending Jesus' ministry of healing the people who are lame. And then we see the completion of that healing work in Revelation. So I do that through large categories of justice, of healing, of creativity, and then we'll do it through like engineering, teaching, pastoring. So that's been one of the ways that I hope to contribute to the Asian American theology. You know, I think we can do narrative in a different way than Western theology. We have a passion for occupation. So for me, I've seen those things come together. And, you know, I have this childhood vision of like, let's say human trafficking, right? You get all your ex-Marines to break into a brothel, rescue the women. You have engineers build schools and medical facilities, bring in teachers and medical staff to educate them, give them healing therapists. And then you have businessmen find occupations for them to take on and be self-sufficient. I mean, if you're looking at the trajectory of how you bring someone from a dark place into thriving, what occupation is not necessary, right? You need all of them. You need governance. You need all of them. So that's the ultimate vision. I hope that as people understand their calling in individual ways, in reflecting Jesus and the narrative, redemptive narrative, that then we can start piecing those things together. And I think that's a part of what Jesus meant when he said, "My kingdom come," right? In God's kingdom, there's no sex trafficking, human trafficking.
But everything you just said, though, it can apply to anyone. What you just said is a great teaching point for anyone, any culture, any ethnicity. So just to specify it here a little bit more to help me understand what you're saying, are you saying that that whole narrative theology and kind of using your occupation and your status and things like that for the kingdom of God, are you saying that it specifically relates to Asian culture because it's very common in our culture to have a great passion for our occupation and for academics and things like that? Therefore, you're going to try to take that very, very important aspect of most Asian families and then and then shed some light on how that can be and should be used for the kingdom of God. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I think there's an audience perspective, but I think from me as an Asian American, I think I value this narrative theology probably more than my Western counterparts. That's very oppositional, very kind of like almost legal and philosophical as they approach theology, systematic, right? We in Eastern culture value storytelling. And 2/3 of the Bible is in story form, but how much of our pulpit comes out of a story? It's almost just like a filler. So I think there's that aspect of me that I'm contributing my Asianness into narrative theology. Not that I'm not making that up, right? I didn't invent it, but I think I have a disposition towards it. And then part of my Asianness, I think, is expressed through that value for occupation as well. So I guess in two ways, like the audience I want to speak to, Asian, but everyone, but me as an author and as a pastor, I think that's my bend because I'm Asian American.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like how, and that's what I'm talking about. That's what I am trying to learn from you and from others, that we might as Asians relate more to the narrative style. That's what kind of speaks to us a little bit better than maybe how you explained it, the Western style. And so that's very insightful, very, very insightful. Well, man, we talked about a lot of good stuff. I know we could probably talk forever and talk about a lot of different.
Who's still here? Made it to an hour 30.
Bad stories.
Thanks for. It's just me, you, and John.
But man, I hope for anyone who's listening, but even for your church and friends of ours, I hope we could just talk more about this. I think it's really important. Like I said, I've been asking questions and talking to our friends about our culture for so long, and I think I feel like, again, we grew up kind of acclimatizing to Western culture and Western authors, right? The Pipers and all those guys. And I think we never really unpacked our culture. Therefore, sometimes we don't even understand like why certain things are pretty hard. And I think this is kind of what I hope that we can just kind of learn more wisdom and insight from. And so this is really good stuff. I hope we can do this again. Keep on thinking about more topics and more good and bad, negative, positives that we unpack. I think it'll be good stuff. And dude, man, I feel bad for your knees, dude. I feel bad for your knees.
Thank you, brother.
We're getting old, dude. We're getting old. Stem cell. All right, man. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, John, really appreciate your work. And I think Asian American pastors, we don't really have a platform. I just really appreciate you building that out for us, kind of gathering, these voices and helping us have a space to just think together and put stuff out, put content out, and do it in a way where, it's Asian American centric, right? So I just really appreciate that, and thankful for you, man. We'll hang out.
Let's do it. Let's build it together, man. Let's build it together.
I ain't really changed like I thought I would. It's like another day in the good. Laid back sipping, sun rays on the pad. Ain't no worries when you're winning, ain't no way to be mad. Cookout vibe, got the whole fam present. Life is a blessing, thankful for every second. Best foot forward, I'm two-stepping. Best kept secret, I'm two weapons.